Hey there, everyone. That sexy nerd is back again. And, well, this one's going to be slightly new, but it's not, well, it's new. It's for me. It's mostly for me. I'm sorry, guys, but you get to watch it with me. So, hooray for the channel and for you guys and for me, especially. Now, this is, I'm sure nobody's ever reacted to one of his videos before. I don't know. But whatever. It is. I always enjoy Johnny. I love his stuff. I enjoy his material immensely. I've enjoyed him for years now. Some call me Johnny. I don't know if everybody on here has heard of him, but he's a great video game reviewer. He's very funny. He's gotten a lot better over the years, and he only gets better and better as time goes by. I hope to aspire to be just like him one day. Now, I have always loved his material, but he is doing like when he covered the Kingdom Hearts games, I was not in the channel yet. I believe like I did not start my channel yet, and other than that, he has been reviewing Final Fantasy games, and he's reviewing my favorite one. So I had to do it. This game is so near and dear to my heart, and I love it. And it helped me get over existential crises, like the fear of death, and it's just such a personal game, and it's a deep game. And if you guys have never heard of it or played it, it's called Final Fantasy IX. It's a fantastic game. But it's still only for a certain group of people. Not everybody will enjoy this game. I get it, but I love it. I love the story. I love how it plays. It's probably the easiest one to play, in my opinion. But yeah, easiest one to play, not the easiest one to beat. But we'll find that out very soon. So not really much to say anymore about that, so why don't we just get started on the video and let Johnny explain all this. And remember, please, smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And remember, sign up for my Patreon for all my latest reactions to all my latest videos. And let's do this thing, y'all.
Engagement.
Oh, I thought he was gonna do it that way. Yeah, he probably still will. Oh, I love this game. Ryuki Ito.
Oh God, they're just getting longer.
Yeah, it's a Final Fantasy game. What did you expect?
Well, I'll tell you, when we know the topic of
I'm surprised I had so much to talk about, though.
video is going to lead into something big, the hardest part is just figuring out what to say to kick things off. And today's subject is no different. It's Final Fantasy IX, the last Final Fantasy for the PlayStation 1. And depending on who you ask, the last traditional mainline Final Fantasy. I'd argue that's the next game, Final Fantasy X for the PlayStation 2,
that's
but
true.
I can save that topic for later. But yeah, as we all know,
You think this video is going to be long? Listen, depending on the success of this video, I might do Final Fantasy X too, because honestly, 10 is actually one of my favorite Final Fantasy games as well. It might be my second favorite. It just kind of flip flops with that and 7. I love 7 so much, but man, it has not aged well, and I still have not played the remakes. So I have the first remake, but I don't have Integrate, and I don't have I don't have the new one, so I'm just waiting for the prices to go down because they're way too expensive right now. It's bullshit.
PlayStation gave the Final Fantasy series a whole new bunch of eyes and ears on the franchise. 7 was a massive success, and 8, while not as well received, still brought in big numbers and
Mad
reception.
money.
And while the devs were appreciative of this, I'm sure, they decided for their last game on the PS1, despite being the turn of the millennium, a new age, a new generation, they were going to go back to when the franchise didn't have fancy cars, motorcycles, space stations, or a Latin chorus. Final Fantasy IX was going back to the series' roots, a world within a medieval fantasy setting, complete with classic airships and a shitload of steampunk and other far-out concepts like death chariots that suddenly spring from a trapdoor. What the fuck? Nine's development goes back as far as mid-1998 before Square put the finishing touches on Final Fantasy VIII, if you can believe it. There was a period of time where work on 8 and 9 was being done simultaneously.
Wow.
And fun fact, 9 was developed here in the United States.
Really? It makes
Precise,
sense.
which ended up benefiting Japanese and American devs because the location wasn't terribly far from Japan in the continental states. And seeing that I live in this unwiped butthole of a country as of 2025, I think I'm legally obligated to say that 9 is better than 8 by principle by this fact alone. USA, USA. Fucking love bald eagles. But while 8 was under the watchful eye of Yoshinori Kitase, his hands no doubt full from the success of 7, 9 saw the return of Hiroyuki Ito, as well as designing 9's battle system, a job he's already proven time and time again he's very much familiar with. Originally intended as a side game that would act as a retrospective for Final Fantasy at the time, it was decided to make it the 9th entry that would act as the series' swan song on the PS1 before making the leap to the PlayStation 2. This would also be the last time series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi would be directly hands-on with a mainline Final Fantasy game before departing Square in the early 2000s. Around this time, he was juggling between game development, his management role in Square, and directing the upcoming Final Fantasy The Spirits Within movie that was intended to be the start of Square's endeavor to make it big in Hollywood, which did not happen, to put that lightly. But looking at the glass half full here, he considers Final Fantasy IX his favorite entry in the series. Indeed, to a lot of folks, Final Fantasy IX is where the series peaked. I don't necessarily agree with that, we'll get into it, but you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't like this game. As for me, unlike Final Fantasy VIII, I actually did get this game year of release.
Yeah, also I hope he mentions the fact that everyone hated this game. People were telling me not to play it because it sucked when I first got it. I'm so glad I didn't listen to most of them because some of my other friends were like, oh yeah, I played this game. It's going to be so fucking good. And I was like the first of my friends to beat it too. So I was like, yes! Yes!
Final Fantasy IX was released in November of 2000, so I asked for it as a Christmas gift for that year. Because you see, I said before that my initial experience with the 8 demo left a bad taste in my mouth, which is why I skipped it for the time, but I still felt bad for doing that. I was still a massive Final Fantasy fan despite that, so I figured I should be trying to experience the new stuff. So I was committed to getting this one, and I was not only heading in with intrigue, but anticipation. All the commercials I saw of the game filled me with a sense of wonder and strangely nostalgia, despite only being 13 years old when the game came out. I think it was Vivi. I saw the design, I said to myself, that's the classic Black Mage look. I want to get this. A combined effort from Shuko Murase, Hideo Minaba, and Toshiyuki Itahana would act as main character designers for this, as Tetsuya Nomura was likely too busy wrapping up 8 and working on Final Fantasy X, and because Hironobu Sakaguchi wanted to harken back to older Final Fantasies, aesthetically speaking. And dude, these guys fucking killed it. I love Final Fantasy IX's character design so much. They're some of my favorites in the whole franchise.
Yes!
The cartoonish proportions, the vibrant expressions, they evoke a feeling of fun and adventure, which I think perfectly complements the goal the staff were trying to achieve. Hell, they went a little further with it too, because they made a whole ass CGI short for a Coca-Cola.
What?
Outside of the obvious product placement, that bottle cap just revealed that dude's in a furry. Coke does that? I mean, Coca-Cola, not the narcotic. That's amazing. Still, this wouldn't be out of place in the game proper. It's just a pity about all the death and explosions later. So yeah, I got this for Christmas, and it was all I played through winter break and most of early 2001 as my family was slowly transitioning from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2. I couldn't put it down. I thought the game was the best the series has ever looked. All the production values were just aces for me. I was positively lost in the gargantuan soundtrack. I love the music so much that my uncle gifted me the Final Fantasy IX official soundtrack for my birthday that next year, which I still have to this day.
Look at you!
Fuck, I miss CD players. I was also one of the unfortunate few that got the Brady Games official strategy guide. Piece of shit. Good God, talk about getting blue balls. Unlike the awesome guides made for Final Fantasy VII and the like, Square really wanted to push its play online service around around this time,
Wow.
since the service started in June of 2000. Play Online was meant to be Square's everything website, so to speak. You could play games online, chat with folks, use email, read comics, browse the internet, and shop for Square stuff online. It's not really a thing anymore, but that's not important. To drive up initial interest for Play Online in the West, they thought it was a good idea to use the Brady Game Strategy Guide as a means to essentially force players to use the Play Online service so that they can actually use the strategy guide they already spent money on. The guide was infamously bare bones, deliberately giving you as little information as possible so that you could input these special keywords to unlock the actual guides tucked away in the Play Online service that you also needed to pay for. Thankfully, this was circumvented by two things. One, it was the year 2000. Browsers like America Online and such were already a thing, as was GameFAQs. I was not wanting for other strategy guides that didn't cost a thing. Does anyone else call it GameFAQs, by the way? I know it's FAQ, but I want to pronounce it phonetically every time I see it, so am I just fucking weird?
Yeah.
Secondly, and perhaps
that's the way I hear it.
for a dumbass like me, unless you were hard-pressed on getting absolutely everything in Final Fantasy IX, this game really didn't need a guide as far as just completing the game goes. Mechanically, 9 was very straightforward. There was no materia system, no junction system, nothing that came across as flavor of the month or overly gimmicky.
You know, that was my problem. When I was a kid, I have ADHD, so I cannot focus on lots of things. And sometimes that would factor into my gameplay. I'd be like forgetting what the game told me, or I'd just be skipping over. Maybe it's because I was bored. Maybe I don't even have to blame it on my ADHD. Maybe. But, you know, I couldn't focus. I still can't to this day focus on certain games that do not explain things very well. But this one, I got through. I think the reason why I love this game so much is because, like, I got through it all on my own. Like, I didn't need anybody's help. I didn't even look up a guide. I think I only looked up a guide to look up the special bosses. That's it, to do all the side special missions, like the Ozma bullshit and the Chocobo thing. So, yeah, that's the only time I ever looked up a guide. And by then, I had already, like, beaten the game. So, yeah.
You had dedicated party members suited for dedicated roles, old-fashioned equipment, a traditional leveling system, abilities that were yours permanently once you learned them like Magicite did in Final Fantasy VI. This was a return to classic form.
Oh my God, this
as
music.
much as I was enjoying myself, this was a Final Fantasy that for years I would find difficulty going back to, like I could with some of my other favorites in the series. You know, Final Fantasy IV, I've played that game dozens of times. Final Fantasy VI, shit, I lost count. The same could be said with 7. In fact,
Really?
not counting the playthrough I did for this video, I can count the number of times I fully completed Final Fantasy IX with one hand. The reason may be obvious to those that might see where I'm going with this.
I know.
Fuck, this game originally released was just unbearably slow. It was my intention to record the PlayStation original for this video because that's the version I grew up with and played the most. But even with proper emulation and the use of turbo features to save time, after a couple of sessions, my patience was already being strained. Battles were the king of this bullshit.
Yep.
Let's use a boss battle as an example.
Okay. I admit it. I'm a nerd.
Imagine all that. The battle swoosh, the black loading screen, the camera panning across the arena in multiple angles, the models finally loading for every encounter in the game. Random fights in the overworld, scripted battles in the story. I tell you folks, that shit adds up quickly. And as I get older, I grow less tolerant of it. And I'm aware that the re-releases of Final Fantasy IX have all the typical bells and whistles that make this less cumbersome. You know, shit like speed-up features, God mode to help with certain encounters, and I considered it briefly, but I always thought the upscaling job on the backgrounds and all that looked ugly, and I didn't want to repeat myself too much from the problems I had with Final Fantasy VIII's remaster. But then I remembered, wait, that's right, there was this Moguri mod for the PC version that not only tweaked the models to look beautiful for higher resolutions, but the backgrounds were properly upscaled and made higher quality thanks in part to AI assistance. And I'll be the first to say, fuck AI. Generative AI, more specifically. I think it just promotes laziness and homogeny for a quick buck. But when AI is carefully used as a tool and not an excuse, in this case to pay respect to the original work, to help achieve what simply isn't possible because of the lack of original assets or what have you, I find it less dubious. But that's a contentious topic I'd rather not spend too long in for this video. I just wanted to get my general stance on AI out there. That shit has made some of my favorite porn sites insufferable now. On top of the quality of life inclusions from re-releases, the Moguri mod also lets you customize shit like battle transitions to make them much snappier, which combined with the speed up feature made this revisit way less exhausting, though admittedly I did miss the battle swoosh. With the mod enabled, it just fades to black before loading the battle, and I found that disappointing. You gotta have the battle swoosh with classic Final Fantasy. It's a tradition as important as the Final Fantasy main theme in my eyes. You can also adjust the frame rate of the game, make it run at a higher FPS, and I tried this for a bit, but I decided against it after just a couple of sessions. I don't know, I think the smoother animations made the game feel slower to me, strangely enough, though maybe that's just because I'm used to seeing the PS1 Final Fantasies run at 15 FPS. Call it nostalgia goggles, but I don't know, I think the game just looks and feels better in its native frame rate. Before we
see, like him, he's a different person than I am. Me, I don't give a shit. I mean, I understand why, like, you wouldn't go after a game multiple times because you're exhausted, but the remaster that I have on the PlayStation 4 and 5 is honestly all I need. Like, I've beaten it multiple times on there. It's great.
Before we get into the plot summary, I want to clarify something regarding the footage you're about to see. I recorded most of the game with my community Discord, the Subshack. You get access to it when you subscribe to my Patreon on at least a $5 level, or sub to my Twitch channel. To make the gameplay my own, I decided to let my audience decide most of the names for my adventure, and it went as well as you already probably concluded.
Oh boy.
Zidane became Rizzler, which I think ended up being the winner because of how many people it stunlocked, myself included, when they realized I named him that. I don't even know who the fuck this Rizzler is, and at first I thought it was a Batman shit person. No. I think it stems from this TikTok kid from New Jersey. And personally, I don't see the resemblance, but to each their own.
No, it's because, oh my god. It's because he has got, he thinks he's got game. It's not from a TikTok kid. Jesus. You named him Sorry? That is so mean. Vivi, you named Sorry? Oh, Jesus Christ.
Came Sorry, which personally was the one I hated the most because sometimes I couldn't tell when characters were referring to Vivi by name or just apologizing. Steiner became Otis and Garnet became Sphene. If you know, you know. I can't really get into that right now. Yeah. I named Freya Forgore, though looking back, I could have easily fitted it as I Forgore. That's on me, my apologies. Also, they couldn't have picked a better picture for the name selection here. Way to rub it in, assholes. Yeah. Kina became Yes Chef. Nothing complicated about that, they like to eat. Aiko became Small, which, well, yeah. And finally, the Flaming Amaranth became the Flaming Dick Butt. For the sake of keeping my composure, I decided to use their default names for plot summary purposes, because otherwise this might be incomprehensible to you, and more importantly to myself. But as always, I'd like to thank my supporters for joining me in this recording adventure. I'm sorry I made you guys wait so long for this video, and I want to get things back on track for 2025, but before any of that can happen, we gotta talk Final Fantasy IX.
You get it.
Let's get into the story.
As long as you make it good, I don't give a shit.
It's a lovely day in the Kingdom of Alexandria, with townspeople gathering in the streets, children playing jump rope, and airships flying dangerously low to the ground and danger their lives with a potential downdraft alone. The theater troupe, known as Tantalus, are planning to perform the beloved I Want to Be Your Canary for Queen Braun and her daughter, Princess Garnet till Alexandros the 17th.
Goddamn it.
I'm just going to call her the princess. However, Tantalus are in fact a band of thieves, consisting of Senna, who I think is a clown, or at least clown adjacent, Marcus, who honestly I wish were a permanent party member. I like him. Camaraderie, his down-to-earth nature, and come on, goblins are cool. Then there's Blank, who, alright, we gotta talk about the design here for a second. The large-ass belt around his face is one thing, but what is going on with his body? Is he a Frankenstein creature sort of deal, or are these like humongous skin grafts? What kind of shit have you been in, Blank? And finally, there's Zidane, our main protagonist with a monkey tail that he only uses once in the whole game. And yeah, it's pronounced Zidane. You hear me, Zidane believers? I'm right, and I know I'm right because Dissidia tells me I'm right.
Yeah. Same here.
I owe you one.
Tantalus have been hired.
That's how I did it too. I was calling him Zidane for the longest time, but as soon as I heard it was Zidane, I'm like, no! I thought it was Zidane. Because that's what me and my friends were calling him, but Dissidia proved us wrong. I love Dissidia too. I hope he covers that game one day because, man, I have some memories with that game. Every single time I was bored, just play the shit out of that game.
Sitbabu of the Kingdom of Limblum to kidnap the princess and bring her back to Limblum for her safety, since there's ongoing fears that the Queen of Alexandria is becoming more erratic and likely wants to begin conquering the remaining kingdoms in the continent. Fortunately for the band, the princess also fears her mother is heading down a dark path and offers no resistance to their plan. But escape doesn't come easy when you have a burly knight in some loud-ass armor chasing you down like it's his job or some other shit. Though Captain Steiner of the Pluto Knights tries his damnedest to ensure the princess doesn't get swooped, circumstances will force him and Tantalus to join together and escape the evil forest after the ship forces a crash landing there after getting shot down by the Queen's armada. And then you got this kid here named Vivi that just wanted to see a fucking play, dude. But one, his ticket was a fake, so that's a bust. Two, he was coerced into climbing the rooftops to see the play for free, all because Rat Boy here needed some company, the lonely fuck. And three, he's mistaken for one of the princess's kidnappers and finds himself with Tantalus just to get away from the heat. Christ, he's only a child. With Vivi and the princess in immediate danger from the hostile plant life, Zidane makes the decision to leave Tantalus since he feels it's the right thing to do now.
You know why they automatically assumed he was a terrorist? It's because he was black.
With his father/mentor figure Baku agreeing to cut him loose, but only after duking it out mano a mano like all good adoptive sons and fathers do in RPGs. Baku is the de facto leader of Tantalus, and though he doesn't get much screen time, I love how, despite playing up being the no-nonsense father figure of the group, he's clearly the most theatrical of the gang and gets kicked sparring with his friends while wearing a dragon helmet for some reason. What was that about? After destroying the giant plants that were holding Vivi and the princess captive, the evil forest begins to petrify, forcing the gang to make a hasty retreat. Zidane only barely managed to make it out himself, thanks to Blank's last-second sacrifice, causing him to petrify with the rest of the forest. Nowhere to go but forward, they always say. Since the crew is far below Alexandria, they have no other recourse but to head into the nearby ice cavern that'll take them up the mountains and out of the mist that surrounds the continent. Even considering the short venture through the cavern, I'm amazed no one here suffers hypothermia. Oh wait, they just turn out to be sleeping, courtesy of their recent stalker, a sinister black mage known as a Black Waltz that's been ordered by the Queen to retrieve the princess and bring her back to Alexandria. Luckily, Zidane must secretly suffer from insomnia because he doesn't stay asleep for long and confronts the Black Waltz all by himself with nothing but his 2 daggers and the power of anime by his side. But this is just the beginning of the party's troubles. Before that, as the gang exit the ice cavern, the princess decides to go under an alias to hide her identity for the time. For as well educated as the princess seems to be in a multitude of things, she still needs to ask Zidane what a dagger is and then decides to nickname herself Dagger. You know, assuming you don't name her anything else, but assuming you went with the default, that's the fucking best she could do. Shortly after leaving the cave, the gang enter the nearby village of Dali, Steiner hoping he can commandeer the cargo ship to get...
It was cheap. It's not the best you could do. It's just, oh, they thought it was cute. They named her Dagger because she was looking at a dagger like they said in Final Fantasy IX in a nutshell. Like a moron.
him and the princess back to Alexandria. But it's here where they make the startling discovery that the Queen, using the power of mist, has been cooking up artificial black mages to help build a magical army she'll need to begin her massive conquests. Vivi, a black mage himself, albeit fun-sized, begins his wacky existentialist journey as he processes who or what he actually is. But there's no time to dawdle as another one of the Queen's black waltzes enters the fray that the gang immediately dispatch of, so you know, fuck that guy.
I know, seriously, the game is literally like, fuck that guy. I mean, they went out and had him looking like he was teleporting and everything. He was the coolest one, and yet they drop him immediately in favor of number 3. Which again, I love, but I think they just put everything into number 3 and just said, fuck the other 2.
But then after managing to snag the cargo ship, they're confronted by yet another black waltz that Vivi managed to subdue with the power of pissy fuck you energy. Much to the chagrin of Steiner, who really wanted to use the cargo ship to get the princess back to Alexandria, Zidane and the princess take the ship to Limblum instead, where they meet with its king Sid Fabul, currently suffering from a case of the oglub, a transformation he underwent thanks to his wife, who wanted to teach him a lesson after Sid cheated on her. Oh, you motherfucker, you lech. Well, better an adulterer than a possible wife beater, I guess. Sid doesn't want to risk leaving Lindblom open to a possible attack until he has all his ducks in a row, but the princess has other ideas. The queen's recent behavior in the Black Mage factory back in Dali has left the princess with all sorts of questions, and she believes the best course of action now is heading back to Alexandria to confront her mother in hopes of not only getting answers, but believing she might be able to change her mother's mind. You poor, deluded dumbass. After participating in Lindblom's Festival of the Hunt, where wild animals are released into the very public districts of the kingdom where combatants can earn points for getting more kills than the others to prove their worth, and it's confirmed that civilians die from this tradition all the time. I don't even think the running of the bulls is this reckless. Jesus Christ, guys. The princess decides to drug the victory meal with sleeping weed, knocking everyone out except herself and Steiner. And I don't know, sleeping weed? That just sounds like regular weed to me. It was a big meal. As the princess and Steiner begin to secretly make their way back to Alexandria, the rest of the gang decide to accompany Freya, a friend of Zidane that is also a resident dragoon for this game, to the kingdom of Burmecia, since they learn that the queen has her sights on Freya's home now and believe they can use this as an opportunity
to
learn
more already?
the queen wants and possibly explain the Black Mage thing. Unfortunately, they're going to get a lot more than what they asked for. After crossing Gazamuluk's grotto, the gang witnessed the kingdom of Burmecia ransacked and abandoned, nary a single citizen in sight except for one couple that Zidane barely rescues in time, so yeah, things are pretty dour here, but Zidane and the others do manage to spot the queen, accompanied by General Beatrix of the Alexandrian army, and the prettiest man alive this side of RPGs, Kuja, one of the more beloved Final Fantasy villains for sure, but for the love of God, I just don't understand the codpiece thong combination. What is going on there? Through eavesdropping, the gang learned that the Burmesian citizens have fled to the nearby Clara, a settlement protected by an enormous sand tornado that's supposed to prevent invaders from attacking, but is somehow still approachable on foot? I don't get it. The queen plans on attacking Clara next, which gets a random Burmesian soldier all hot and bothered, forcing Zidane and the others to reveal themselves and intervene, where they are immediately humbled by General Beatrix, demonstrating why she's the baddest motherfucker on this planet. But then, strangely, though beaten and despite Kuja acknowledging that they might be trouble later, the gang is not then immediately killed, but left to lick their wounds. Call it a classical villain blunder or overconfidence, but given how dedicated the queen is on conquering the entire continent, I'm shocked she doesn't have Beatrix or Kuja finish the gang off then and there. But thanks to the queen's sudden act of mercy, the gang managed to make their way to Clara to warn the Burmesians of the queen's impending attack. To bolster the sand tornado's potency preventing the queen's aerial assault, the Burmesians enact a secret ritual that you may think looks like river dancing, which was very much a fad of the late 90s to early aughts, but I assure you, it's not. However, instead of strengthening the storm, this ends up breaking the magical harp that contains the jewel needed to keep the storm going, so now Clara is just plain old fucking defenseless just in time for the queen's next assault. But she's not just bringing Beatrix, her soldiers, and black mages this time, she's packing summoning magic too. Beforehand, to quickly catch up on the princess and Steiner's journey back to Alexandria, the two end up rendezvousing with Marcus and Cinna from Tantalus on the way to the city of Treno, as the two are looking to find Supersoft to cure Blank from his perpetual heart-on. The princess decides to stay and help them for a bit, feeling partially responsible for Blank's fate, and while originally they planned on stealing the Supersoft, it turns out the medicine belongs to a former tutor of the princess named Dr. Tot that willingly gives it to the gang, who then also shows them to the Gargan Rue, a passageway that'll send them straight back to Alexandria. Hooray for happy coincidences. Hooray. So the princess, Steiner, and Marcus head back to Alexandria, where they are immediately captured by the queen's guards, so much for peace and negotiations, huh, Garnet? But while Steiner and Marcus are imprisoned for the time, the princess is forced to undergo a sinister ritual where her latent summoning abilities are extracted from her body and given to the queen to use as a means to bolster her army. And first up in her line of sight is Clara, which she annihilates with no issue thanks to the power of Odin. Speaking as a Final Fantasy fan, I like that Odin uses his Gungnir lance to do the job, which implies either that the tree is immune to instant death or Odin couldn't be asked to cut a tree. Fortunately, Zidane and the others managed to escape in the nick of time thanks to hitching a ride with the Black Mages teleporting back to the Red Rose, the personal airship of the Queen. There we see a conflicted General Beatrix, lamenting over the fact that the Queen is not herself and is feeling underappreciated, as the rising prominence of the Black Mages and the use of summoning magic gives her and the Knights of Alexandria less importance. This is actually a sticking point I have against this character, but I'll save that for later. To make matters worse, the Queen reveals to the General that she plans on having the Princess executed for aid in Tantalus, which at this point I can only imagine General Beatrix thinking to herself, fuck me, I made the wrong career choice. Overhearing this conversation, Zidane and the others use the ship's teleportation pods to get back to Alexandria before the Queen does, giving them ample time to rescue the princess from impending doom, and these two colorful chuckle fucks. Though General Beatrix is quick to intercept, she has a change of heart when she sees the unconscious princess, realizing that the queen did mean serious harm to her own daughter, and there decides to put the people of Alexandria first, assisting the heroes as they make their escape via the Gargan. Unfortunately, the Gargan gets a case of the heebie-jeebies and goes spiraling out of control, causing the gang to end up in the nearby Pinnacle Rock. Silver lining though, there they meet Ramu, who bestows the princess his summoning power after she proves capable of staying awake during Grandpa's story time. But the bad times just keep on a-coming, since the queen then immediately sets her sights on Limblom, causing untold damage and chaos using the power of Atomos, while the princess can only sit and watch in vain. I know Atomos is a summon that goes back as far as Final Fantasy V, but this was my introduction to it, and Christ, it creeped me the hell out.
Same
seeing
here.
This gargantuan eldritch horror being used to suck up people alive. What a terrible way to go. Also, holy shit, Final Fantasy IX is clearly meant as a callback to previous Final Fantasies because the gang's penchant for getting emotionally bullied all the time can make Cecil Harvey blush. But you know, wounds heal and kingdoms can be rebuilt. Sid points the gang in the direction of the outer continent, since rumor has it the source of the mist, which is believed to be the main source of monsters in the area used for the production of black mages and responsible for the terrible draw distance of the main continent, lies somewhere in that region.
There, honestly, for some reason, this game has an absurd amount of callbacks to Final Fantasy II in particular. I honestly don't think that the characters getting constantly having to go through shit is necessarily from Final Fantasy IV, although I think that was also the idea. It's mostly from Final Fantasy II. Final Fantasy II, like, so much crap happens to you in that game, man. Just so much, and so many people die. I think people died less than in Final Fantasy IV. Well, actually, no. Because they died more in Final Fantasy II because for some reason most of the people came back to life, except for Tella. There were like 5 or 7 people that died in Final Fantasy II, and they didn't come back. They tried to have a spin-off game or whatever, but that was it. Didn't really revive them.
Luckily, they managed to find an ancient pathway that connects the Mist and Outer Continents courtesy of Kina, a gourmet chef that you can technically recruit as early as your trip to Gazamluk's Grotto in Disc 1.
Seriously?
But it's only now where they're mandatory to recruit, just for them to find the entrance to the Outer Continent by complete fucking accident. Besides that, Kina is more comic relief than someone who has actual stakes in this plot, so after this story bit, they pretty much just hang in the sidelines unless you do some optional side quests with them. Alas, the journey through the ancient pathway is not without its snags. After avoiding certain death from those wacky old death chariots, seriously, what the fuck is this thing?
I know.
The gang meet one of 2 bounty hunters hired by the queen to hunt down the princess. Lonnie, my beloved. I won't spend too long on this, but God, I love Lonnie. I mean, she's not much more than a nuisance, only getting in the way a couple of times, but damn, I love her personality, and I love her design. The humongous axe, the fur-trimmed waist cape, the hat, the cleavage that my younger self definitely appreciated. People say that they wish General Beatrix was a playable character, and thanks to Moz, that is possible. It's crazy, but no, man, I wanted a playable Lonnie. And if this game ever gets that remake that's been rumored for fuck knows how long, I hope Lonnie gets more love. Lonnie's been sent by the queen to capture the
Beatrix
dead
gets
or
more
alive
love.
and reclaim the jewel around her neck, as the queen wants the summoning power lying dormant within it, and 3 other jewel pieces she's been hunting down across the kingdoms. Sadly, Lonnie doesn't stand much of a chance when it's 4 versus 1, and she gets her ass beat with little problem. Without further obstruction, the party makes it to the outer continent and soon come across Patai. Before voice acting became prominent in Final Fantasy, you really just had to guess on how these villages were pronounced. Anyways, the villages there they stumble upon a black mage that currently isn't setting shit on fire and just seems to be shopping around, but they run away before the gang can ask what their deal is. With their curiosity piqued, they follow the black mage through a large forest nearby, where they then witness an entire hidden village appear before their very eyes. An entire village of black mages that grew sentience like Vivi and defected from the queen's army, making this spot their own home, aptly named the Black Mage Village. Hey, it's to the point. While the Black Mages are initially scared shitless of the gang's unexpected arrival, Vivi is able to get a conversation going and learns of the shortened lifespan of the Black Mages, most lasting only a year with some already passed away. It's at this point in the story where I just want to give Vivi the biggest hugs. Imagine learning that you were built to be a weapon, and then learning that you have an incredibly short life expectancy, and Vivi, you know, being the prototype of these dudes, is essentially just a kid, dude. No kid should have to go through this kind of shit, man. But after enjoying the visit for a bit, the princess learns from one of the locals that Kuja was spotted flying towards what's known as...
It also never made any sense why the other Black Mages seem older, even though, like, it's probably worse for them. That's awful. They have the attention, they have the lifespan of a fly.
as the Sanctuary, located deeper in the outer continent, and that the dwarves might be able to help them reach it. Access to the Sanctuary is limited to those who completed a holy union. It's basically a marriage without it being a marriage, much to Ziddane's dismay. But I also love how Vivi and Kina have to participate in one as well in a separate ceremony, and you could cut the awkwardness with a fucking knife. It's hilarious. With everyone properly hitched, I suppose, the gang are free to explore the pathway towards the Sanctuary, but along the way they come across a girl in desperate need of a ladder. This is Aiko of Madain Sari, the village of the summoners that at just the age of 6 has already made shoplifting from the dwarves one of her hobbies. As thanks for helping her down, Aiko takes the gang to her home, where the princess begins to realize that she's not actually the blood daughter of the queen, but a summoner born from this very village who, a long time ago, lost her parents in a violent storm that burned most of the village down and took out most of the summoners. After a lovely dinner and a nice pissing chat between Zidane and Vivi, boys will be boys, Zidane and the others make their way to the Sanctuary, which is in fact the Ifa tree, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a big-ass tree smack dab in the middle of the outer continent that's the source of the mist. With Aiko removing the special seal placed there by previous summoners, the gang can head inside and fight all manner of undead creatures, including one enemy that I can only describe as a giant stone cock with tentacles that you can immediately kill by throwing a soft at it. Oh yeah, it became too soft to live. That's right, you can kill a giant cock in this game by making their dick limp. Waka.
Oh, all these years. How did they get away with that? Like, nobody on the dev team, nobody during censors actually saw that? That is hilarious. Became too soft to live. How did I never know that all these years?
Waka. Deep inside the tree, they run into the monster in this game by making their dick limp. Waka waka. Deep inside the tree, they run into the monster known as the Soul Cage that oversees all operations of the tree, revealing to the party that the mist is just a byproduct of the tree's actual function to stimulate man's bloodlust for war and cause death immeasurable through the ensuing chaos. The Soul Cage then reveals that if it's defeated, no more mist will be spread throughout the planet, and thus no more black mages will be created as weapons. The gang then immediately deciding, alright, bet. Get a life, idiot. No. With no more mist being produced, the gang figures it's only a matter of time before Kuja realizes something's up. But before preparations can be made, Aiko is told that the village's precious jewel has been pilfered by the returning Lonnie, my beloved. Yep, Lonnie's back to try and kidnap the princess once again, this time using Aiko as collateral in exchange for the princess and her necklace. But her partner in crime, Amaranth, who was technically introduced alongside Lonnie, but I felt I didn't need to mention him until now, decides to turn on Lonnie for taking a hostage since he views it as cowardly. Lonnie is set packing once again, with Amaranth deciding to join the party since there's a bit of history between him and Zidane, but honestly, that doesn't amount to much at all if you ask me. Zidane as a kid got Amaranth in trouble framing him for a theft he didn't do, and I think Amaranth took that personally, wants vengeance. His focus on Zidane comes off more as a curiosity than malevolence, which just confuses me. I don't know. Amaranth's not the most developed character out there. In fact, he's the least developed of the main characters. He strikes me less an edgy monk, but rather someone who's just very fucking bored with his life. Well, with that momentary distraction dealt with, the gang head back to the Ifa tree and spot Kuja nearby, but he's not alone, as the queen has brought not only her entire naval fleet, but she's packing Bahamut as the next summon of choice to wipe Kuja off the face of the planet.
Yeah, just like I remember seeing Amaranth on the cover. Well, not on the cover, but on the back. There's a really cool shot of him running away from the explosion. And I thought he was the coolest character, and I couldn't wait to see him. And then by the time he comes out in the movie, I didn't even see him at first. But then he just, for me, he just came out of nowhere. His first introduction was that little scene when Lonnie is holding Aiko hostage. It's so weird. It was so weird.
As the queen feels she no longer needs Kuja for world domination. But Kuja was expecting this, that smug, shit-eating prick, and reveals his secret weapon, the Invincible, an airship with a giant eyeball thingy that brainwashes Bahamut to do Kuja's bidding, his immediate action afterward being regicide. The queen is then wiped off the face of the planet. Oh wait, there she is. But with her dying words assures the princess that she's finally free from the greed and hatred that consumed her soul, and that Alexandra will be much better off with Garnet ruling as the new queen. It's a bittersweet coronation, but Garnet is made the new queen of Alexandria. Probably has to eat pizza with a fork and knife and some other shit like that now. But celebrations never last long in the world of Final Fantasy IX, especially if it isn't the ending, and last I checked the time of this video, we still got plenty to talk about. Kuja returns with Bahamut by his side and plans on nuking all of Alexandria. Oh shit, I just
my
realized
favorite part of the
Fantasy 14
game.
totally called back to the shot of Bahamut during the Battle of Carno aftermath. God, that video is going to be the death of me. But much to the shock of Garnet and Aiko, their personal heirlooms alongside the other jewels that the queen has been slowly collecting begin to coalesce, acting as a new summoning stone that brings out the mighty Alexander, rocking a new pair of angel wings that seems a little extra, but I don't give a fuck. This looks amazing. And with one fell swoop, Alexander manages to annihilate Bahamut with little effort. But Kuja looks at the glass half full and immediately tries to use the Invincible's giant eyeball thingy to take control of Alexander. But then old man...
Like, you can literally say that Alexander moved and Bahamut died.
And Garland here has other plans, being the true owner of the Invincible, and has arrived to essentially spank Kuja in the ass. Garland uses the Invincible to destroy both Alexander and a good chunk of Alexandria, with the gang somehow managing to avoid a fiery fate. I seriously don't know how they managed to get away in time. This happened seconds after we last see the gang still on top of the castle. Maybe this was a shout to Final Fantasy VIII. The gang ended up taking refuge in Limblum for the time, but with Alexandria in shambles, which wasn't too long after the queen's death, tyrannical as she may have been, Garnet's emotional trauma is at an all-time high, being unable to speak for a time until she overcomes her grief. This really sucks in-game too, because this means Garnet can just lose a turn because of her trauma.
Most annoying part of the game.
I get it. It's a great integration of story and gameplay, but forgive me when my pragmatic response to this is, alright Aiko, it's your time to shine, get your ass out there.
Yeah, basically.
Sid informs the gang that Kuja was last seen escaping on one of Sid's old airships alongside some black mages, prompting Vivi and the others to immediately head back to the black mage village to get some answers. It turns out Kuja's tricks informs the gang. Alright Aiko, it's your time to seen escape exchanging on one of Sid's old airships. A pragmatic response informs the gang that Kuja was last seen escaping on one of Sid's old airships alongside some black mages, prompting Vivi and the others to immediately head back to the black mage village to get some answers. It turns out Kuja's tricked some of the black mages into joining him in exchange for extending their life cycle, preying on their newfound fear of death. But some black mages decided to stay behind to protect what they consider precious, including a newborn chocobo they decided to name Bob. You see, what did I tell you? There's always room for a Bob. Seeing the fear and anger within Vivi over his fellow black mages being used again and again, one of the head black mages of the village reveals Kuja's secret hiding spot in a desert located in the outer continent. With a new boat at their beck and call courtesy of Sid, the gang head to Kuja's hideout and are immediately captured by Kuja, who was expecting them. Christ almighty. Kuja promises Zidane that he'll let his friends go if he heads to the forgotten continent located west of the map and retrieve an artifact known as the Gullick Stone, located deep within this place called a Oilvert. Seeing as the place contains an anti-magic barrier, Kuja knows he and the black mages wouldn't stand a chance, to which I say this motherfucker doesn't know about softs. Seeing no alternative, Zidane agrees to head to Oilvert to retrieve the stone, learning of an ancient civilization belonging to a planet called Terra that has long since faded from memory, but for some reason Zidane can understand its language and technology with little issue.
I'm such a dumbass. I literally take care of those things and I take care of those things. I try to fight them. And it's always a hard-ass experience. But I'm usually more over-leveled when I get to that part. Are you telling me I could have just killed them with a soft? God damn it, man. I'm a bad dude. I'm bad at being a dude because I couldn't get the actual tick joke. I cannot believe. Until they said that it looked like a giant tick with tentacles, I did not put two and two together. It's a mystery.
Belonging to a planet called Terra that has long since faded from memory, but for some reason Zidane can understand its language and technology with little issue.
That's a mystery.
During the excursion, Zidane encounters the Council of Exposition, going to some length describing Terra as a planet that was on the verge of complete destruction, but was saved after many great sacrifices, and is currently under stasis until further notice. But enough about that for now. The Gullick Stone is within reach, but it's protected by an ancient guardian known as the Ark that Zidane has to defeat to nab the stone. Fun fact, you can get this guy as a proper summon later on, and it's the most fucking ridiculous summoning animation that only hits once, so you know, nice of the round this guy ain't. But this thing turns out to be a fucking transformer that's design calls back to Cruise Chaser Blasty, one of Square's earliest games on the Famicom. The design was then later brought back in Final Fantasy XIV, with the Cruise Chaser enemy going full circle with the reference, or should I say, forward and back, and then forward and back, and then go forward and back, then put 1 foot forward. Fuck, that song is annoyingly catchy, isn't it? Zidane manages to retrieve the stone, but back at the desert hideout, Kuja plans on being a little fuckboy, threatening to kill the rest of the gang before Zidane can make it back with the goods, prompting Sid to hop to it and save the day with a very, very annoying stealth minigame that's more a test of nerves than actual. I hate this game. Thanks to Sid, the rest of the squad is free from their predicament and make a beeline for Kuja, with Zidane eventually joining them, but Kuja gets the last laugh, managing to not only kidnap Aiko, but also snag the Gullick Stone from Zidane during a moment of distraction. Kuja makes a getaway, but the gang is hot on his trail, following his airship to the Lost Continent far north of the map. With the Gullick Stone now in his possession, Kuja can enter Mount Gulug in hopes of finding a summon more powerful than Alexander, so that he can stick it to Old Man Garland, that geriatric fuck. Knowing that Aiko is also a summoner, he attempts to perform the same ritual that was used on Garnet to extract the Eidolons contained within Aiko. But Aiko's Moogle friend Mog steps in to protect the Munchkin, using the power of trance to become Medine and absolutely lay waste to Kuja's henchmen in the most over-the-top way possible that I still think looks sick as fuck to this day. Though his plan to extract Aiko's power failed, witnessing Aiko's buddy use the power of trance gives Kuja a most devilish new idea for achieving ultimate power and scurries off to parts unknown, with the gang being unable to follow as they're distracted permanently trying to deal with the Jonkler twins. Immediately after, the gang hear the voice of a woman nearby that turns out to be Sid's wife, Hilda, who Kuja kidnapped some time ago when he commandeered one of Sid's airships for personal gain, and for some reason kept her alive all this time because I assume he's lonely and needed someone to blabber to.
He's not that bad of a guy.
Alright, I got questions. Keeping Hilda alive all this time is one thing, but unless I'm mistaken, I think Hilda's been cooped up in this room located in Mount Gulug all this time, right? Look at the room she's been staying in. That's an elaborate fucking bed that I don't think you just set up like a sleeping bag, you know what I mean? Which means she's been here for a while, which means Kuja's had access to Mount Gulug before, which means he didn't need the stone to enter Mount Gulug, which means he somehow got through Mount Gulug's door, which requires the stone to even open. I get that he still needs the stone to activate the extraction circle located deep within Mount Gulug so he could take away Aiko's summons, but why bother telling me that access to the volcano is impossible without the stone when that's clearly not the case? Kuja set up shop here some time ago.
Okay, maybe. It was, first of all, I think it was a mistake. And second, you could make the argument that they were there for a good while. Maybe he set up the room and expected to stay there for a good while. Maybe he was like, what? Maybe he had Sword and Thorn make up their room, and that's why they're like, why didn't we ask for a freaking severance package?
Maybe you can argue that the bishop overseeing the entrance to Mount Gulug just simply didn't know that, but I think this could have been written a little better. It's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. It's just one of those fridge moments I got when I was writing this part of the script. Well, thanks to Kuja not killing Hilda, she's able to elaborate on a few details about the theater major. For one thing, Kuja isn't from this world, Gaia. He's from Terra, the old planet those creepy heads wouldn't shut up about. Secondly, to gain access to Terra, the pathway connecting both planets must be open, which can only be done by heading to this spot called Ibsen's Castle, nabbing the 4 elemental mirrors inside, and then placing the mirrors in 4 separate shrines across the world, each protected by an elemental guardian. And wasting no time, the gang go and do just that, successfully retrieving the mirrors from the castle, defeating the guardians, 3 of them being defeated off screen, and finally leaping headfirst into the pathway connecting to Terra.
I was stuck on this part of the game for so long because I don't know what was going on with my game. I think it was my PlayStation 1 was like finally like starting to age out or something. It still kind of works, but it can't handle like some games. And it would just always like freeze at this part. And eventually I had to put it on the PlayStation 2 when I got it. So I didn't have it for the longest time. So I was stuck here for the longest time.
Quite a visual spectacle. It's low-key one of my favorite FMVs in the game. It's just so pretty looking.
It is.
Also, Garnet gets her voice back. Hooray!
Yeah,
I also love the new hairstyle. Okay, so the gang reach Terra, and already things are getting weird. The inhabitants are a bunch of folks who look an awful lot like Zidane. Everyone rocking the same blonde hair, the monkey tails. What the hell is going on here? Well, thankfully, Old Man Garland here is here to take a nice steaming exposition dump to get us up to speed. As we know, Terra was a planet on the verge of completely going under. Like, even after getting things somewhat back in control, it was only a matter of time before Terra's fate was permanently screwed. So the Terrans constructed Garland to get the planet back in shape, and thousands of years ago, he attempted to fuse Terra and Gaia together to save the planet, which didn't exactly work out. All it did was essentially buy Terra some time, sealing it deep within Gaia. So Garland instead decides to create the Aoife tree to stop the dead souls of Gaia from returning to the planet, so that he could eventually replace them with Terran souls, which would then inhabit the bodies of the genomes, the folks who look exactly like Zidane. Zidane.
Yes.
Basically, the genomes were created to become the new vessels of the Terrans, but to help expedite the death of Gaia's souls, Garland created Kuja to push Gaia into bloodshed and chaos. But after realizing that Kuja got too into theater class, he then created Zidane to replace him as his new angel of death. And Zidane ain't no Kuja, he doesn't want to hurt anyone, but you can't deny that for most of the game, wherever Zidane went, death was sure to follow. Ain't that some shit? But seeing Zidane grow up to live a life of a well-meaning thief and not an angel of death makes Garland believe Zidane is also a failure and plans on converting him to a regular-ass genome. Zidane doesn't take learning about his true origins very well, I doubt many would, and there's even a brief, and I emphasize brief moment where he becomes bitter, full of self-doubt and uncertainty, and tries to get his friends to piss off, but his friends are basically like, man, shut the fuck up, and bada boom, he's all better, it's never brought up again, just like that. Suck on that, Cloud.
Yeah. You can forgive him for this, though. I never hated him. I was a little bit like, don't push your friends away. Don't do that. But I understand at the end of the day, he's so confused. He's angry. And really, to be fair, the only person that brings him back is Garnet, Dagger, whatever the fuck. And it's because he loves her. Honestly, that was the sweetest part of the game for me. I love that.
Like this moment at all. The gang take the fight directly to Garland, and it goes as well as expect 4 young folks dogpiling an old man would go. Garland gets his ass kicked, but Kuja suddenly intervenes and provokes the gang into attacking him. And though it looks like the gang is about to win, Kuja was deliberately taking the L so that he can enter trance. But Kuja's trance is further fueled by the stagnant souls of Gaia that were locked inside Garland's airship, the Invincible. Kuja immediately demonstrates this new power by wiping out the party with a single ultimate spell and giving Garland the old boot to the head, which, fuck, he needed trance to do that, loser. But from beyond the grave, Garland mocks Kuja, stating that the cackling douchebag was designed with a short life expectancy and that soon, Kuja will expire. Not too different from the Black Mages. Irony is a bitch, ain't it? Learning of this, Kuja, for lack of a better word, snaps and figures if he's going to die, he's going to take everyone with him, using his new power to destroy the remains of Terra. The gang managed to commandeer the Invincible, however, and make a hasty retreat to Gaia, but their troubles aren't over yet.
Somehow getting everyone off the planet
has become covered in mist. Kuja not only survived his planetary temper tantrum, but by opening the gateway between the souls of Gaia and Terra through the Aoife tree, Kuja plans on heading to Memoria, where the fabled crystal resides, with intentions of destroying it, for the crystal is the catalyst of all life in existence, and without the crystal, the universe basically ends. Yeah, definitely a theater kid. But the gang doesn't want their world to end, all their stuff's in there. So with the power of friendship and a massive air fleet courtesy of every kingdom on Gaia, the party is able to enter Memoria, where they learn a lot about the creation of life, Gaia, Terra, all that shit. It's a fucking museum tour with Garland acting as the guide. And if we look to our north here, we spot Kuja being a little bitch baby that needs a good thrashing. But while the gang give it their all, Kuja throws another shit fit and sends everything to oblivion with another cast of Ultima. Zidane and the others then awake to find themselves in wherever the fuck this is supposed to be, greeted by a voice belonging to this being known as Necron, who believes that the existence of Kuja's desire to end all life proves that all of mankind yearns for death, so they decide then and there to send the universe and everything in it back to the Zero world, where no crystal resides, no life can bloom, everything returns to nothingness. Think the Void in Final Fantasy V, only it's just now being brought up. Zidane and the others, however, prove that life is worth fighting for, and band together one last time to send this unsubtle as fuck metaphor for death packing. With Necron defeated, the crystal is spared and Gaia is spared a gruesome fate, but the Aoife tree begins going haywire, no longer serving a purpose, with the gang deciding it's time to get the fuck out of there. But Zidane hears the voice of Kuja wishing him goodbye before heading off, and feeling remorse for the man as both a fellow genome and realizing it was thanks to Kuja that the gang was able to escape Necron's weird-ass dimension or wherever the fuck this was at all. Zidane decides to stay to try and rescue him, but despite the man managing to avoid the rampaging trees like a boss and reaching Kuja in due time, Kuja is clearly on death's doorway, having only enough time to share his regrets with Zidane and atone for his sins before finally passing away. Life moves on and we see what the gang's been up to in the meantime. Steiner and Beatrix become an official couple, Aiko is adopted by Sid and Hilda, Kina becomes head chef of Alexandria, Amaranth buddies up with Lonnie, my beloved, you're too good for this, edgelord. Freya reunites with her long-lost boyfriend, who I haven't even mentioned in this plot summary at all because the story quickly stops giving a shit about Freya. It's tragic.
It's really tragic.
As tragic as realizing the narration of this bit is being told through a dying Vivi, whose life expectancy soon runs out. But he not only leaves in good spirits, wishing all his friends a joyous life, he also leaves behind a surplus of children to continue his legacy. I don't know how that works. I'm not going to think about it. And I like to think these kids have a longer life cycle than a typical Black Mage. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother enrolling them in school, you know what I mean? But we then see the princess, or should I say queen, not in the best spirits, believing Zidane to have perished at the IFA tree. But Zidane, having a knack for theatricality himself, reveals that he's alive and well during the climax of the play Tantalus was throwing for the kingdom. With a stream of tears running down her face, Garnet reunites with her love, celebrations to be had, and probably a shitload of Coca-Cola ready by the kegs if the commercial was anything to go by. So despite the length of the summary, if you ask me, I still consider Final Fantasy IX's narrative more straightforward than 7, and especially 8. It lacks some of the character complexity that might make the rosters of the previous 2 games more compelling to some, but I think because it's much easier to follow, it's much easier to appreciate all the little things. What really makes the narrative stand out amongst some of the better entries in the lineup, though, is the stuff I really couldn't get into during my synopsis. As with previous entries, Final Fantasy IX is very character-driven. They're what make the story so enjoyable and memorable despite its flaws. But it's not just about that. There's also something to admire with the tonal balance of Final Fantasy IX. I'd argue, despite the return to a fantastical medieval setting, one that isn't as heavy with the contemporary sci-fi elements of previous games, despite the bright and exaggerated character designs, a different species to boot. If this world's inhabitants are not just humans, we got talking goblins, rodents, hippos, birds, all kinds of animals. Despite the colorful cast, this still remains one of the darker entries in the series on how it deals with the subject of death and how people of all walks of life react and respond differently to it. Death is the major driving force of the plot, but it's not, it doesn't feel senseless, unlike, say, Final Fantasy II, where I feel it was mainly a means to show how fucked up the Emperor was. And that can be effective in its own more simplistic way, for sure, but death in this game gives everyone in the story added weight, relatability. It makes the heroes more emotionally compelling. It's the entire reason why Vivi is one of the most beloved characters in this game, if not the series, while also making the villains more pitiable and tragic. Not enough to make them completely sympathetic, but enough to make the player understand why they feel the need to do what they intend to do. The queen lost her biological daughter years ago and eventually her husband, and the grief and bitterness she suffers from the pain of loss made her easily manipulated by Kuja into becoming a bloodthirsty tyrant. Obviously, it doesn't excuse her actions, and she's a real piece of shit at her worst, and she does reap what she sows at the end of the day. But a part of me gets the source of darkness in her soul.
And he even, Kuja even said, I was surprised. Kuja kind of implies that he was even surprised at the depths that Braun was able to go. So he created a monster.
Kuja, my god, he was created to wreak havoc and gleefully carries out his purpose with a dose of pompous theatricality. But everything turns south for him once he learns that he, much like the very black mages he helped cooked up, was given an expiration date. And that fear of death, that fear of the inevitable, makes him fucking wacky, and he lashes out in the most dramatic way. Now, I wouldn't consider Kuja one of my favorite Final Fantasy villains, but his actions towards the end of the game and where it stems from, I always found chilling, pitiable, and somewhat relatable. Not to get too deep into this, but years ago, right out of high school, this is around 2005, I had a massive case of thanatophobia, the fear of death. I don't know.
Oh my god. I had that too, around that time. Oh my god. It was actually, again, it was this game that really not alleviated my fear, but helped me face it a little bit. I still have that fear every once in a while, but man, back around that time, I had that fear. I had that fear that I was going to die, that when you die, that there's nothing. I remember, and this is why it's my favorite game, one of my favorite games of all time, because it helped me get through something. I always had my parents say that video games will never do a thing for you. It'll never help your life. And their mindset was too small for what the future and technology and really imagination could hold. Despite how backwards our ways have become in certain ways, we've also really advanced as well as far as storytelling and understanding is concerned. We really have at least advanced in some ways.
Why? But it suddenly hit me that one day I'm going to die. I will cease to be, and there's nothing you or I can do about it. It frightened the shit out of me, and on occasion it still creeps up here during my most private moments. While I
Me
can't relate
too.
to his origins as an artificially created genome that looks more bird than monkey when he gets all Super Saiyan, there's a sadness I feel when I see how Kuja reacts to his sudden realization of his short life. And towards the end, when all's said and done, he's left a broken husk that can only apologize to Zidane for being so shitty as the life slips from his body. A part of me thinks, I wish he had a better outcome. To
Yeah.
me, that's how I know I enjoyed a character's journey, a hero or villain otherwise, when I'm engaged enough to think about these things. The journey of Vivi and the Black.
That's how you create a sympathetic villain. Not always coming up with ways for them to make them sympathetic, like Marvel movies do, or any movie does from now. Like not every movie, but a lot of movies do now. That's the way you do it. Have them regret their actions at the end of it. Have it do it that way. It's simple but effective.
Mage is also one of my favorite bits. The Black
Oh
Mages
God.
start no different than mindless
Yeah.
goons to beat up when they're in our way.
Mhm.
But when they start gaining sentience, seen as early as the cargo ship from Dali, and when they start contemplating what it means to live and die, compounded by Vivi's own journey of self-discovery, God, it's so compelling. I said it before, but Vivi is really just someone you want to hug. He was made to be a weapon, but was considered a defect and discarded. And for all intents and purposes, he's just a kid. And he goes through some real traumatizing
Really?
shit. But despite this, and thanks to his companions,
That
he's able to grow and go on a grand journey with the others where he finds new purpose, new strength, and an appreciation for life. All
Vivi, yes, like Vivi especially. That's why he resonates so much with so many people, and why he's so many favorite characters. He really has gone through the most shit, and he handled it like a champ. He never, yeah, he was scared. He was scared at times. There were times that he froze, but he only froze. It never stopped him. It never stopped him in his journey. Like I could only imagine what the kind of strength that it took to do that as a kid. I couldn't even imagine. I could barely imagine tying my own shoes at age 7. So it's really tragic that he had to go through all this stuff, and again, he himself, his character, really helped me get through some shit. You know, it really did.
of this despite knowing that he doesn't have long to live. In my eyes, Vivi is the best character of Final Fantasy
Yep.
IX. I love his character, his personality, his journey. He checks all the boxes. Which isn't to say the other party members aren't as engaging. No, I love them too.
All of them.
But let's be real, not all of them get the same level of attention as Vivi does, but most are still insanely lovable.
I love
As far as
Steiner.
main protagonists go, I love that Zidane is one of the more sanguine heroes of
You're
Final
saying
Fantasy.
them
I'm
all?
reminded of Bart's, only if he went to
Yeah.
R-rated movies as a kid and was a bit of a pervert. His character motto, "You don't need a reason to help people," perfectly encapsulates what makes Zidane so lovable.
Yeah.
He helps people because he wants to. Yeah, he tries to get some poontang a little too much, but he'll easily jump into the face of danger if it means helping his friends or stopping villains from being pricks.
This kid always also, like Zidane, always reminded me of myself. He really did. I mean, yeah, I say Vivi too, but Zidane as well. And everybody is like, the whole thing where Zidane finds out that he has not a lifespan, but he was basically used for something else is also kind of redundant for Vivi. And I'm like, no, it's not. And if anything, that's the whole cycle. That's the point. Multiple people can feel this way. And honestly, not only that, the fact that Vivi was there, I think helped him get through his own existential crisis that he went through. But again, Zidane always reminded me of myself. Like, maybe I'm not as pervy, yeah, but but yeah, I always try to crack a joke when things are not as serious to try to alleviate the situation and make things better.
It's a refreshing change of pace compared to Cloud or Squall, if we're keeping to the PS1 games. Not that I'm saying I didn't enjoy Cloud or Squall, no, I love their journeys
I
too.
love their
But
personalities.
sometimes you just want to be in the shoes of someone who isn't constantly going through inner turmoil. Which isn't to say Zidane doesn't have his own inner conflicts, but if you ask me, I
does.
think outside of realizing he's genuinely falling in love with Princess Garnet, and I do love his struggles with his insecurities as he deals with that, developing a romantic relationship with someone that goes beyond just being horny. The other stuff with him, I believe, is clumsily handled. It's mentioned a few times that Zidane does wonder about where he came from and what his purpose in life is, but for most of the game, it just doesn't seem that big of a deal to him. Whatever comes his way, he deals with it. So when he's finally
That's what I'm
confronted
saying.
with the truth towards the end of the game, when Garland reveals everything to him and he goes into that little pissy fit, it doesn't work for me. Zidane's journey isn't defined by his conflict with it.
Not conveyed well, and he gets it right back of anyway. I don't know if, yeah, it's implied, but I don't think he actually lost his soul or temporarily lost his soul. I believe he was in the process of losing his soul, and I feel that the way they were had to lose his soul is like to depress the fuck out of him, you know, to take away everything that he had gained by depressing him and making him easier to control. That's why I never really got mad at him for cursing and yelling at his friends, because, you know, it wasn't him really. It was just whatever Garland was doing to him.
And if you can even call it that, he wants to do right by his friends because he feels it's the right thing to do. And because he's in love with Garnet. You can't forget about that part. But that's about it. A little less complex than previous heroes, but certainly more fun. I love Zidane, his attitude, his courage, and his penchant for getting under the skin of others. Steiner hates his fucking guts so much early on. Princess Garnet can never seem to catch a break. Her hometown was wrecked and she lost her biological mom at a young age. And after her coming of age, her adoptive mom uses her as a means to an end, and that very power gets a lot of people killed, leading her to having a massive guilt complex and this need to try and solve things by herself.
She loses her voice.
Phoebe, she's a character defined by her journey and growth, starting the game as a girl who's a little in over her head with wanting to leave the castle and seeing the world, to becoming someone who can stand on her own feet, take control of her destiny, and stop being so goddamn hard on herself. A little been there.
There's one single video that's responsible for leading over 2,000 Christian men to permanently quitting the P word. And this video that I'm going to share with you in a second has been creating waves on social media and sparked a movement.
They're done that, but she's still one of the better characters in the game because, like Zidane, she gets a lot of screen time and thus a lot of room to stretch her wings, and they start growing feelings for the monkey boy. Also, come on, she leaves the best first impression with how she gives Zidane a run for his money, with how playful she is playing keep away in the opening minutes of the game. I just wish she considered a wardrobe change at some point. Listen, 13-year-old me appreciated the form-fitting tights. I mean, her pants are just fucking painted on, and when she cuts her hair later, her ass is always on full display. But coming back to this, all I can think is, dude, cover up, there's children here. Steiner, I love so much. He's such a down on his luck ass.
He reminds me of you.
Deeply committed to his job as captain of the Pluto Knights, but he clearly gets no respect from the main guard, his queen, Tantalus, and Zidane, at least initially. But over the course of the game, he learns to remove that giant stick out of his rusty metal ass and prioritizes doing what's right, not so much as a knight, but as a human being. His commitment to protecting the princess makes him overbearing as fuck at first, but even early on, you can see that deep down, he's a big softie, showing genuine respect for Vivi, assisting those in need, and admitting his feelings for General Beatrix over the course of the game. But it's around when he starts showing his true feelings towards Beatrix that I feel his screen time starts to wane, and to be fair, it's completely natural for some character arcs to conclude before others. It all depends on their significance. But this is unfortunately a consistent thing for every character that isn't Zidane, Garnet, or Vivi. I'd say the rest of the cast is secondary at best, completely superfluous at worst. Poor Freya. She's introduced as an old acquaintance of Zidane, and it's clear the two have a bit of history. But after shit goes down in her hometown Bermesia and later Clara, her character focus is almost completely dropped. And maybe this was intentional in a meta sense. I think of her character model, right? To be forgotten is worse than death. And in this game, it feels as if the story just fucking forgets about her, but it doesn't feel intentional. I figured she'd get something to do afterwards. She finds out her long-lost boyfriend is alive after thinking he was dead for the longest time, but that's never explored or brought up again until the end credits. And I have to wonder, why they even bother with that if they were going to do nothing with it? Hell, I think they should have had her do something with Beatrix to bring back something I mentioned earlier. Now, I love Beatrix. I mean, talk about a character that leaves one hell of an impression. She constantly whips your fucking ass like nothing else, yet never manages to finish the job, strangely. But I always thought she got off too easily for aiding the queen in her bout of conquest, which included killing a bunch of Bermetian soldiers, you know, Freya's people. And though she expresses her inner conflict about it,
Lydia, what's going on?
that if they were going to do nothing with it. Hell, I think they should have had her do something with Beatrix to bring back something I mentioned earlier. Now, I love Beatrix. I mean, talk about a character that leaves one hell of an impression. She constantly whips your fucking ass like nothing else, yet never manages to finish the job, strangely. But I always thought she got off too easily for aiding the queen in her bout of conquest, which included killing a bunch of Bermetian soldiers, you know, Freya's people. And though she expresses her inner conflict about it, originally, it's not so much about the escalation of the queen's actions, but rather feeling she and her soldiers are being neglected in favor of the black mages and summoning magic, which rings just a bit selfish to me and not at all paladin-like. Even Cecil showed some remorse for his actions in Final Fantasy IV as early as the opening minutes of the game. If that was their intention with Beatrix as a callback, I sure as hell don't see it. Now, when she realizes that the queen truly means to kill the princess for personal gain, she wises up and puts the people of Alexandria and protecting the princess first, and then later apologizes to Freya when the queen begins going apeshit with power. But honestly, I don't truly buy it, and neither does Freya, to be fair, but it's quietly dropped afterward. All is forgiven, but I don't think it's earned, and I don't think Beatrix was really sorry for it, which is why I think there should have been a dynamic between her and Freya to eventually get her to open her eyes and reflect on the people she's harmed. It would give her more development outside of her budding relationship with Steiner, which I love for the record, but at the same time, it would also give Freya more to do. Still, I enjoy Freya as a character for as little impact she has in the story, and if this game does get remade, I hope she serves more of a purpose. The same could be said.
I hope they do that, like, immediately. That rang true in my head for the remake, because that really would be a great story if they explored more of her actions in regards to that. That seems like the most logical step to take, and I'm like surprised I didn't think of that.
For the rest, Aiko's the rambunctious child that so desperately wants to win the affection of Zidane, but her role is largely supplementary to the gang's journey. She's energetic, a bit of a shithead, and knows way too much shit for a fucking 6-year-old, but her antics mainly serve to bridge specific plot beats together, the origins of summoning, the Alexander sequence, and helping Garnet rediscover her past. Outside of that, she's a great poet, but a lousy cook, but damn does she have the best therapy pet in the form of her buddy Mog. There's nothing much to say about Kina and especially Amaranth, but to give Kina some credit, they make for effective and endearing comic relief without coming off as distracting. Comedy-centric characters are always a risk because if you don't find the joke funny, it can completely take you out of it. And thankfully, I don't find a problem with them. They're completely disconnected from the main story most of the time, but manage to pull through when it's needed. It's a small moment, but one of my favorite bits with them is when they help Aiko cook the gang a great meal during their first visit to Madain. Sorry, again, it's goofy, but it also emphasizes Kina's strengths as a genuinely great chef. Surprisingly, they're also how you get some great closure for Vivi if you're thorough enough, and I'm deeply appreciative of that because I just like seeing Vivi happy. Oh boy, Amaranth. Look, monks are generally my favorite job in any Final Fantasy, and if we're speaking strictly as a playable character, Amaranth kicks ass, but I just don't find his character compelling at all. And I want to stress, I understand not every character in a game, especially in an RPG, needs to be able to stand out like every major character. Sometimes characters exist to supplement or enhance the character development of others, or used to highlight themes or plot devices, which is where I feel Amaranth tries to land, but he could have been a little more interesting. He just hangs around because years ago Zidane framed him for a crime he didn't commit. And I think he feels some sort of way about it, but at the same time, he doesn't seem too bothered by it. And what's more, his backstory is something you can completely skip because it's not only in an optional active time event, but you can also choose not to hear his story in that cutscene, and then he just fucks off. Why are you here, you lanky douchebag? After losing to Zidane in a one-on-one battle, he decides to tag along because he wants to understand why Zidane spared him. But I think it's such a nothing character arc for the guy. Besides that, he's the typical loner that slowly learns to warm up to his companions, and individually I think he's pretty weak, but I understand his main purpose is likely to demonstrate how the gang, particularly Zidane, can win anyone over with the power of friendship, because outside of the death allegories, that's another major element of Final Fantasy IX, the power of friendship. It may seem a little hokey to some, but what makes this cast of characters so compelling is their willingness to look out for each other through thick and thin. Shit, it's the reason why the beloved You're Not Alone sequence towards the end of Disc 3 works so well for a lot of people, but also why I think it's one of Zidane's weaker moments, narratively speaking. These guys go through a lot of shit together and are willing to put up with a lot to not only save the day, but to make sure everyone gets a happy ending, except maybe Freya. Like in Final Fantasy V, sometimes you just want a group of heartfelt comrades. Which is to say, I'm not trying to downplay their personal conflicts and trauma. Vivi and especially Garnet go through some heavy shit, but the game still manages to balance grim moments of lighthearted levity that doesn't distract from the larger picture. Things are fucked for sure, but that doesn't mean the gang have to be so downtrodden. Ooh, that's a word I don't get to use often. Ooh. And that's just with the main cast. Another big part of the game that highlights the best aspects of Final Fantasy IX's world building and character development is everyone else. Tantalus, the citizens of Alexandria and Limblum, Treno, the Black Mage Village, the Mughals of Madain Sari, and all of those other Mughals you meet when you're delivering mail to them. Not to mention all the one-off areas you visit. Jesus Christ, there's so many likable NPCs in this game, and a lot of them have their own moments of growth and development that complement the narrative, or hell, some of them, no matter how small or insignificant, just put a smile on my face. You know me and my love for Majora's Mask. All over the game gives me a world that feels alive and full of people I can actually give a shit about. Sweet. And Final Fantasy IX has that in spades. And there's just too many to get into. But 9's world is legit one of my favorites in the series because it feels like every single goddamn area has interesting folks to talk to or help.
Not a boring
What helps this
area.
aspect of storytelling is the game's ATE system, or active time event. Throughout the story, a prompt will appear that gives you the chance to catch up with others currently
I can never get all of them.
And the game often uses this as a means to give characters moments in the spotlight that in one part fleshes them out, but also for first-time players gives you a hint on where they should focus on next. You can argue that they can potentially bog the pace down, especially when there's like 2 or 3 available all at once and you want to see them all. And there's even some you can't skip. But usually the game's pretty good about not spamming these, and honestly, these aren't something I skip anyway, because I like to rewatch these moments. Some of them are genuinely great for storytelling, or you just want to see what shenanigans others are currently up to. Final Fantasy IX is a story about death, learning to face it, accept it, finding new purpose in life, and enjoying the time you have now with the ones you love. It's only during the tail end where I think it falters a bit. I mean, the final boss, Necron, I used to not like this dude as a kid because I thought he came out of nowhere, despite thinking the battle being so cool and climactic. And that's just what it is, right? The game needed a climactic ending, and I think the staff didn't think it was enough with Kuja. But nowadays, I realize Necron is just the devs putting a physical face on the concept of death for the sake of a final battle, which again is climactic, but it's unsubtle as a hammer to the fucking face, and I don't think it was needed. The game's story is by no means perfect. Personally, I think everything concerning Terra and the Crystal is too heavy on exposition. It's like back to back with that shit, especially towards the end of Disc 3. The problem is, if the game expanded upon them, properly fleshed them out, give it time to show instead of telling, the game would risk running overly long. I mean, for Final Fantasy standards. And I don't like when my RPGs run long, which I understand might be a problem later when I start tackling the Persona series and the like, to use that as an example.
How long?
I don't think I'm ready for Persona, but I promise my patrons I start doing it soon, just not yet, not quite yet. But really, there's too much I love about Final Fantasy and its character and world to be really bothered by it. And revisiting it for this review was such a pleasant, endearing, an extremely heartwarming ride that reminded me why I fell in love with it in the first place. Let's put it this way. One of the only challenges I have yet to do with this game is getting the Excalibur 2, Steiner's best weapon in the game.
Me too.
It requires you getting to the final dungeon in the game in under 12 hours. It's a speedrunning challenge, demanding you know all the ins and outs of Final Fantasy IX to get through it as fast as possible. And while a part of me wants to try it just to say I did it, I do enjoy a good challenge, especially with games I love. That requires me skipping through all the dialogue, blazing through all the mandatory locales, skipping all the side quests, ignoring one of the biggest parts of what makes Final Fantasy IX so goddamn great. Not to mention, I wouldn't be able to utilize the game's mechanics to the fullest, and technical issues aside, which re-releases thankfully mitigate, I love playing this game, getting fully immersed in it, exploring the world, doing all the extra stuff. Holy fuck! Let's finally get into the game! To start with the real meat and potatoes, the combat has dropped stuff like materia and junctioning in favor of something more akin to Final Fantasy 4 and 6, restricting characters to only excelling in specific roles. This does mean you don't have as much freedom to make characters how you see fit, but this also means things are less complex and easier to understand. The immediate phrase that comes to mind when describing Final Fantasy IX's mechanics is user-friendly. This is a much easier game to pick up compared to its contemporaries. On top of equipment having their own set of perks giving you added defense and mitigation to certain elements, character abilities and spells are also learned via what they can equip. stuff like doing more damage to certain types of enemies. I like how there's abilities called Bug Killer, Bird Killer, and Demon Killer, but doing more damage to humans is just called Man Eater. Was Human Killer too direct? Let's not beat around the bush here, gentlemen. We kill these motherfuckers. But there's also stuff like leveling up faster, achieving limit breaks faster, learning abilities faster, auto regen, auto life, auto potion. There's a lot of ground covered with abilities you can learn. Though stuff like auto potion can really drag a battle out like a bitch. It's good to have the extra insurance, but these guys pop a potion for even the tiniest scratches. You're wasting valuable items, guys. Whenever you win a battle, you're not only rewarded with experience points, but also ability points. And after getting enough of those to learn the skills you want, they're yours permanently. You're free to switch to another piece of equipment and start learning what that has to offer on top of what you
I don't know why they had to change
like Magicite does in Final Fantasy VI. And it's not just spells and skills. This is also how you're gaining immunity to status effects like poison, petrification, darkness, even some of the nastier shit like zombie, instant death, frozen status, or heat, where you're fucking dead the next turn if you take an action while afflicted with it. It's a real motherfucker. Every character has what's called ability stones that you use to equip these perks in the first place. And though you start with a small amount, leveling up eventually starts giving you more. However, you'll never have enough to equip every perk. There's already a couple of ways to break the game already, believe me. Most of the time, you'll need to consider your ability payload before heading into the next dungeon or preparing for the next major boss fight. As I've been going through this series, I realize I do miss having a bit of that versatility, especially as I get older. I start to have a better appreciation for the intricacies found within the materia system and junctioning. But at the same time, I also love when a growth system is just straightforward. I don't gotta think too hard on shit. Yeah, I normally got no problem. But at the same time, I realize the best and most often sound strategy in Final Fantasy IX usually just amounts to hitting things really fucking hard, and the game rarely requires you to think outside the box for almost every boss encounter, which again, might be a little mundane. It's not Mystic Quest bad, nothing will ever be Mystic Quest. But if anything, the lack of a sophisticated system lets me focus and appreciate characters as designed. You know, what they bring to the table as they are, and I'm happy to say, there isn't anyone here I consider weak or obsolete. No.
That right there is a great callback to the Kraken right here is a great callback to Final Fantasy 1. I finally played and beat that game. That game is so easy. I'm so mad that I just never could get my hands on it. And now I finally got my hands on it because of the Pixel remaster, and it was easy as hell.
As they are, and I'm happy to say, there isn't anyone here I consider weak or obsolete. No, everyone here has a degree of utility that makes any party composition completely viable, though some are more one note than others regarding abilities outside of combat, physical or magically speaking. Zidane is your standard thief, though he's no slouch in physical combat either. He is also the only reliable means of running away from battles with his flee ability, because otherwise running away from encounters in this game is a fucking nightmare. It takes so long, I swear to Christ, it feels like it's bugged.
I'm just a poor boy.
Nobody loves me.
You can also get a shit ton of useful items early in your adventure with the Steel command. And in Final Fantasy IX, I have a very love-hate relationship with Steel. On one hand, like I said, there's a lot, and I mean a lot of great equipment you can get from enemies, bosses especially,
most of the time,
if you take the
it
time to steal
work.
them. And I'm talking things you have to wait a bit to find normally in shops and what have you. And what's even better, you can steal multiple things from enemies in this game. You still have to deal with the probabilities of all that, and hope you get the thing you're looking for. But even if you don't get the item on a successful attempt, you can just keep trying to nab it without worry. But that leads into the exact issue of why I hate stealing. It makes 5-minute battles into 10-minute battles. It's true you don't have to, nor should you get caught up in stealing everything from everywhere. But I'm the kind of guy that likes getting stuff early because it not only puts me at a statistical advantage, those things I steal also come with abilities and spells I normally wouldn't learn until later on. And if I can get it now, I'm gonna fucking get it now. And what's more, this game has synthesis shops where you can make powerful weapons and accessories by combining other items together. And consistent stealing makes creating those powerful upgrades much easier to accomplish earlier in your adventure.
This is crazy because I love all the strategies I was able to come up with on my own, and it's just the game just lays it out for you so well. I don't know how, but you're able to just go through that game, go through it, and figure everything out. It's great.
Hell, with enough patience, you can make a shitload of gil just by abusing the synthesis shop's buy and sell rates. It's tedious as fuck, but remarkably easy to do. Not to mention, Zidane has an ability called Thievery that does more damage the more you have stolen from enemies, so stealing is something outright encouraged by the devs themselves. It's just, fuck, why'd they have to make it so repetitive and time consuming? No shit, and I got no shame in admitting this. I toggled the option in the Moguri mod that always guarantees a successful steal so I wouldn't be wasting so much time stealing shit, because that's exactly what it is most of the time. It's a waste of time. Fuck that noise, man. There isn't much complicated about Vivi. He's the black mage, packing all manner of hard-hitting spells, letting him cover all the basic elements that makes him safe and reliable. If you also have Steiner in your party with him, he can even augment Steiner's attacks with sword magic, essentially the same as Spellblades from Final Fantasy V. And Steiner is already one of the best physical attackers in the game. But with Vivi, he can also contribute to elemental advantages. Steiner, though, just to quickly cover him, like Vivi, there ain't nothing complicated about this guy. He just fucking hurts. And later on, he gets some devastating as fuck sword techniques that make Beatrix blush.
It was honestly until the remaster where I was able to appreciate all the stuff you can give Steiner, because I still like just beat the game and then I would play the game, and then after the whole attack on Alexandria, it kind of like I kind of lose interest in Steiner and I use other characters because like some of them can hit harder than Steiner, but in the remaster, I was able to spend a lot more time on Steiner, and man, he was crazy by the end. I was like, man, I don't know why I ever gave you up. He was like my Orin.
Maybe. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell with her sometimes. I just wish his other secondary...
What?
Make Beatrix blush. Maybe. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell with her sometimes.
Yeah,
I just wish his other secondary abilities like Mental Break or Armor Break didn't have such shitty accuracy, because I can see the benefit of lowering enemies' physical or magical defenses to benefit the entire party, but what's the point when most of the time it just fucking whiffs?
I know.
I'm better off just using a regular attack. This is actually a big problem I have with Final Fantasy IX's combat regarding status changes and enfeeblements. You know, in previous games, spells like Protect, Shell, Haste, Slow, Reflect, Sleep, Darkness, you know, all the status magic had their time in place. Hell, in some games they were outright busted. But in Final Fantasy IX, they're next to worthless because they either have incredibly shitty accuracy, as I mentioned, or they barely last more than a turn or two, if even that long. It's hardly worth the effort to cast them when they're going bye-bye before the rest of your party even finishes taking their turns. The only time I find some use from it is when I'm using Kina's blue magic, like Big Guard, and it's only because it saves me a bit of time from how much coverage I can get from it then and there.
I think that was the point, because if you never... because for some reason Kina's spells are remarkably effective, but everybody else's spells suck, like Steiner's especially. And I feel like the devs did that on purpose so you would try to use Kina more often. I don't want to use Kina, I want to use Steiner.
Otherwise, the only time I'm benefiting from status magic is when I'm equipping stuff like auto regen or auto haste as abilities. At least I know then they won't fizzle out after a single turn, which isn't to say you can't get any use out of them. No, there's still encounters that succumb to the right status effects, it's just they are few and far between. Most battles in this game mainly center on how hard you can fucking smack things, and that might be considered a little boring to folks looking for something more enriching. Garnet and Aiko kind of fulfill the same role. They both specialize in white magic and summoning power, but with the issues I mentioned earlier about status buffs, their main contributions are limited to their healing and offensive magic. Aiko's holy magic is one of the most reliable means of damaging the game, and Garnet's healing potency is just fantastic in getting yourself out of a bind. Both are also capable of summoning Eidolons to bring some extra firepower, but I have mixed feelings about summoning magic in this game. Just like the other PS1 games, summons are visual spectacles that sometimes I just like using because I like looking at them, but most don't offer anything besides a hard-hitting attack, which is par for the course for sure, but in this game, after using them the first time, there's a high chance the next time and beyond you use them, they'll play a shortened animation, you know, to try and get a move on. And I'm appreciative of that, but if the short animation plays, the summon's also doing less damage, and with some, it's just not worth the hassle. There's an ability you can learn called Boost, which guarantees a long animation for larger damage, and I believe the more of a summoning stone you have, the more it powers up the corresponding summons. But on the other hand, some summon animations are just too fucking long to justify the potential damage, contributing to the problem I have with the pacing of battles in this game in general. And to make matters worse, all summons in this game just hit the enemy once, unlike say some dudes in Final Fantasy VII. Okay, one dude in Final Fantasy VII that can hit multiple times. Don't get me wrong, I fucking love the shit out of Ark's over-the-top summoning animation, but come on, man. All that flashy bullshit, and you're telling me it only hits the enemy one time, and not even for max damage? At that, fuck out of here. I still love you, Ark. I'm not summoning very often in this game. I rather just spend the MP on spells that cost less for one thing. They're also much faster, and they reliably do more damage. As the resident blue mage of the group, Kina's versatility entirely depends on whether you spend the effort learning their skills, which is easier said than done in Final Fantasy. Blue magic here isn't learned by watching an enemy perform the spell you want to learn. You gotta eat them, which requires getting their health low enough to successfully do so. Fuck, I accidentally killed them again. God damn it. It's like trying to catch Pokemon in some fashion. I don't like learning.
But it wasn't as good as Pokemon.
It's cumbersome. There was nothing wrong with how it was done in Final Fantasy 5 or 6, so I don't understand the need to change it for this game. But if you do take the time to learn some of the more busted spells, Kina's a walking armada. And if you're looking to power level early on, you know, commit some good old-fashioned Grand Dragon genocide, Kina can get your party levels absurdly high, absurdly early, making the rest of the game a fucking breeze. I don't mind Kina at the end of the day, and hey, in certain encounters, this fucker, some of their abilities can come in real handy. I guess that just leaves Freya and Amaranth, and I don't have much to say about these two. Most of the time I'm bringing these two only because I'm feeling different, or if I fuck with their designs, which I definitely do.
I like Freya.
These guys are plenty capable.
Freya's my
Freya's
Dragoon.
the standard Dragoon, and like Kain, she can jump to avoid attacks while preparing a hard-hitting dive herself. If you kill a bunch of dragons along the way, abilities like her Dragon Crest can deal max damage easily.
Seriously,
Amaranth, the fucking nobody, brings a ton of power with his claws and chakra.
I use Amaranth a lot too.
Like your visit to Oilvert much easier, as that place relies heavily on using your physical attackers. In addition to all of this, every character can also enter a trance state, which is effectively this game's limit break system, only not as good. So maybe the guys behind the scenes figured at this point, hey, limit breaks in the last two games were kind of nutty, and they were, I'm not going to argue that, but their solution to this is one I'm not much a fan of. In Final Fantasy IX, every instance of damage you take fills up your trance meter. Once it's maxed out, the character automatically enters trance, souping up their attack power, and for some characters, even giving them access to some special abilities only available in trance. And unlike limit breaks, trance can also last a few turns, letting characters utilize their special abilities several times. However, any action taken during trance, including doing something like using a regular ass item, also drains the gauge, which makes the second issue even more of a pain in the ass. Trance is triggered automatically. As soon as the gauge maxes out, you're entering trance, whether you like it or not. It is not something you can hold on to or manipulate, and what often happens is that your party member enters trance when you don't want them to, and it goes wasted. That can really suck, especially if you're trying your best to save up for an upcoming boss fight, or when you find yourself entering trance when you already decided on an action, and now the damn gauge is going to drain on something innocuous like using a potion. What the fuck? If the transformation can be stored, this wouldn't be a big deal at all. But seeing that that's not the case, trance can come off as a nuisance rather than a benefit. But I will say I love the different forms the characters take when they transform. My favorites being Zidane because it's basically Super Saiyan 4, and Vivi's because his hat gets a boner. It is simplified, no doubt, but if you ask me, combat is still fulfilling. In one part because it'll never not feel good hitting an enemy with something super flashy and explosive, but also there's so much personality to the character models, the enemies themselves, the environments. Despite only being a few years apart, you look at the production value between this game and Final Fantasy VII, it's almost night and day, whether you're playing the remaster or not. It's just, I wish it were a little faster, naturally, you know, without having the need to use speed modifiers and the like. And I know at least we have those things now, but I do wish for a game still using the active time battle system, something that was made long ago to make battles faster in the first place. I wish the battle speed was fundamentally faster, but off the top of my head, I think from this point, battles will get snappier in the future entries. We'll have to wait and see on that. The combat's never just the only attraction. You should know that by now, guys. Come on, we're on the 9th game, for God's sake. Wait, 7. There's 7 games. There's 10 games left. Oh, I'm gonna be reviewing these until I'm dead. Final Fantasy IX's world is one of the more robust locales to explore in the series. It has giant castles like Alexandria and Limblum, towns and cities like Dali or Kandi, however the hell you pronounce this one, the village of the dwarves, or Treno, the city of endless night. It feels like there's security gates in every other corner of the Mist continent that often reward you with a few knickknacks and other treasures needed for side quests. It also should be stressed that some of these areas are fucking massive, like Alexandria and Limblum are gargantuan, and can potentially be exhausting for first timers or those that don't use a speed up feature. But I think Final Fantasy IX manages to make even the largest, more tiresome areas stimulating, mainly through 2 means. One, there are so many things you can pick up just by examining shit. Anytime you see a little exclamation point appear above your head, it's an item you can pick up. Gil, consumables, Tetramaster cards, Zodiac coins for the Bird Lady and Treno that leads to even more rewards. And that could be a little startling too, because you're exploring in Burmecia, right? And out of nowhere you can find the cancer coin, but the prompt reads, you got cancer. I know it's just the name of the coin, but fuck you for the scare, assholes. If you don't mind extending your playtime by several hours, I implore you, hug the shit out of every nook and cranny in every place in this game, because 9 times out of 10, there's something to be collected. And even if it's not something immediately useful, I just get a dopamine rush finding shit at all. I think they call that ADHD. What's more, this game is positively bursting with side quests and mini games that I find most of them enjoyable. Throughout the entire adventure, you can help Moogles deliver mail to their friends for some fun dialogue and Koopa nuts that you can exchange for even more items. The Mognet stuff is a game-long side quest though, so you gotta be thorough with checking up on every Moogle you see through the adventure to make sure all the letters are delivered properly. And this can be annoying, not so much because it's a pain to revisit some areas if you missed them the first time, but also because some Moogles won't ask you to deliver a letter until you talk with them like twice in a row, and I'm like, my guy, just give me the letter now. I want to say Final Fantasy IX probably has my favorite iterations of Moogles. They look so fluffy and adorable here, and the more unique looking ones like Stiltskin have genuinely great designs. Not this one though. Fuck this guy, because he's the whole ass reason why we're even doing this in the first place. Normally Moogle letters are handled at Mognet, essentially the Moogle post office, but the sorting machine gets jammed because the lubricant needed to grease the gears. This motherfucker's been using to sheen his coat. Why are Moogles fucking like this, man? Tetramaster. It's this game's triple triad, where the name of the game is capturing your opponent's cards and gaining control of the board. But unlike triple triad, there's no benefit to normal gameplay by playing this. It's just a card game that you could waste time on. But I never enjoyed this. I didn't like it then, and I especially don't like it now after I found new love in triple triad. I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing here. To be fair, the same could be said for triple triad when I first played it, but the fundamentals of Tetramaster feel like I need a degree in math and coding. Whenever I think I have a grasp on how things work out, it turns out I'm completely wrong and I eat shit, or I end up scoring perfects by complete fucking accident. What did I do? How did I do that? Early in the game, there's this hippo kid that if you want, you can snag his cards from his secret hiding spot. I did that, and immediately after, I challenged him to a game and got a perfect using his own cards. Yes, I am an absolute dick, but you know what? This kid kind of starts as a shithead, but he gets one of the more heartwarming arcs. You could race him later on to get him in better shape, and further down the road, he shows he has great leadership skills, calming down angered patrons on one of Alexandria's inns. That's the kind of detail I love to see in NPCs, and this game has that in spades. You can be sure every other area, there's a minigame to play in some form or fashion. Like jump roping with some kids, which I swear was much easier when I was younger. Getting old fucking sucks, I tell you. You can bang on some rocks in Fossil Rue to get some nifty accessories. Catch frogs with Kina to get better items for them and prove their mastery against their mentor Quail. Just make sure when you're playing the frog minigame, leave at least one male and female frog alone so that they can reproduce faster. Otherwise, getting to the final reward takes an obnoxious amount of time when you have to wait for the frogs to breed. You know, assuming you're not using the Maguri mod to speed it up, use the Maguri mod. You can bet on items in Treno's auction house, like in Final Fantasy VI, which can be annoying if you're looking for specific items, but then they don't show up, and when they do, they take for fucking ever to win because everyone else just has to show how deep their pockets are. 1% motherfuckers. I worked hard for my gil. Do you know how many calories I burned selling these cotton robes? You guys inherited your money. Shit. Even the overworld has its share of fun with the ragtime mouse and the friendly creatures. During your journey, you might run into these guys accompanied by some wonderfully whimsical music. The ragtime mouse will challenge you to a game of trivia, and the more you get correct, the larger the guild payouts become. And if you know the trick to get this guy to pop up on an almost 100% basis, you can make a lot of go very quickly doing this method. You know, you just gotta handle the fact that you look like a paranoid wreck doing this trick. What was that? What was that? What was that? What was it? Teeth! The friendly creatures aren't as generous with the gil, but you want to run into all these guys anyway, because if you give them the item they ask for, they give you a shitload of ability points, which means you can learn those powerful skills and such with little to no effort. But don't fall for the gimme cat near Daguerrero. He speaks nothing but lies, that feline fuck. Why can't he just be like my cats and do nothing? God, this fucking red light, green light game they have you play in order to save your friends. Really, this whole part of this game with this shit and the desert palace I always disliked. You have to mash the button to advance Sid frame by frame as you're trying to nab the key without the hedgehog pie noticing you. But the fucking thing can turn on a dime at completely random intervals. It scares the shit out of me whenever he manages to spot me, because the level of tension I get here makes my asshole pucker so hard it could turn coal into diamonds. Then the desert palace afterwards is just a bunch of lights switching to open the path out of there. God, in the original release, this place sucked because Final Fantasy IX has a pretty obnoxious encounter rate. It made this place suffer. Now with the re-releases, you can turn encounters off to your heart's content. But I never remember the combination of lights needed to get to the correct path open right away. I always fumble in this area. It's a shame too, because no other dungeon in this game makes me feel this way. There's rarely a place I don't like in Final Fantasy IX. The closest I could think of was Pandemonium towards the end of Disc 3, but that's only a pain if you want all the extra goodies. Otherwise, it's over before you know it. Nothing beats the best minigame though, Chocobo Hot and Cold. Once again, Chocobos can act as your trusty mount to help cover ground faster and avoid random encounters. But by visiting the Chocobo Forest, you can play Chocobo Hot and Cold, where you can effectively use your Chocobo as a metal detector and dig up lots of treasure like gil, consumables, and these fancy little doodads called chocographs, which are basically treasure maps that lead you to super valuable treasure chests located across the globe, containing things like powerful gear and armor, Tetramaster cards, and the occasional bout of anesthesia where your Chocobo trips the fuck out and gets a movement upgrade, eventually letting them travel on rivers, mountains, the very ocean itself, and when you max them out, they can take to the skies and soar across the winds. God, I love Chocobo Hot and Cold. It's such a simple game, but it's insanely addictive. And I love
but it's so annoying.
Exploring the world. It's a great excuse to travel through areas you otherwise have no business going to during the story. Although some chocograph hints can just eat me. Normally you can get a general area of where you should be digging by looking at the accompanying picture, but then there's shitheads like this one, the ocean one. Well, what the fuck? This doesn't tell me shit. Why'd they do that? Eventually, you'll even unlock more areas to play Hot and Cold in, like the Chocobo Lagoon and finally the Chocobo Sky Garden, which also houses the game's super boss. Final Fantasy VII, you had the weapons. Final Fantasy VIII, the weapons, but again, this game, a giant super happy fun ball named Ozma. Despite not having a lot of HP, this piece of shit can wreck you faster than Jesus Christ, like that. Even with the right strategies, and assuming you're not just grinding the hell and back and beat him with a numbers game, Ozma's RNG can fuck you in the ass in the blink of an eye. Let's put it this way, I fought this fucker twice for this video. Once by myself because I wanted to, and I had little to no issue there. The pieces were in place, I encountered all the friendly creatures so I could physically attack them. Things worked out just fine. It was one of the smoothest runs I ever had with the dude. And then I fought him once again with my community Discord where he just bodied me like an asshole. God, that fucking meteor attack. Normally an attack that has shitty accuracy, but Ozma's version never misses and it can just end you like that. Oh, fuck shit, I got the Phoenix prompt. Oh, right, yeah, this means I get a second chance. I'm down, but I'm not out yet, you motherfucker. Son of a bitch. Yeah. Legit, I hated this cosmic form for the longest time as a kid. But you bet your ass, whenever I manage to crack this Christmas ornament, it's like I just won the lottery. And it's worth it to beat him before you tackle the final dungeon of the game, because the other optional encounter, Hades, comments on it if you do, and it scares him shitless. God, this game is just great. I think the thing I love most about Final Fantasy IX, despite the dark turns in the story, despite the questionable mini events, despite the battle mechanics, especially in the original release being so slow, there's just a ton of things about the game's progression and world that fills me with a sense of wonder, a sense of continuous joy. It's a game that I feel is better than the sum of its parts. Even now, decades after my first playthrough, I just find myself smiling as I progress through the game, re-experiencing the joys of watching the Prima Vista fly over Alexandria with the townsfolk looking on, all the colorful characters and villains like the Queen, Kuja, Garland, hell, Zorn and Thorn, the two clown minions that speak as if Yoda discovered palindromes. All of the different one-off areas you visit that, yeah, it sucks towards the end of the game that you can't revisit most of these places because of how the story progresses, but it doesn't negate the emotions it fills me with entering them the first time. The Ifa tree, Ibsen's castle, oh man, Estogaza and the lost continent that leads me into Mount Gullug and the Shimmering Islands. It's a small location, but it has one of my favorite tracks in the game, which is saying something because this soundtrack is one of Nobuo Uematsu's finest. It's the final soundtrack he would compose entirely by himself for mainline Final Fantasy games, And holy shit, what a swan song, so to speak. The dude composed over 110 pieces for this game. Music that perfectly accompanies every emotional turn, every climactic moment, every dungeon you explore, exciting character spots, the countless somber beats. It's fun and whimsical, dark and melancholic, energetic and tense. It has it all. And while it's not my favorite soundtrack, shocking as that may sound, I think Final Fantasy VII beats it by a hair. There's little to nothing I dislike about Final Fantasy IX's score.
I guess I can't
to give some of my favorites, and I have to stress just some, these are only a few. The boss battle theme, it's so intense. It reminds me of Force boss music with how it emphasizes the danger in front of you. Hunter's chants during the Festival of the Hunt. I love how it's reused for the optional Hades fight. What a great theme. Really pumps you up. All of the character themes, God, they're so good. My favorites being Zidana's theme, Steiner's. Even as I listen to it on the soundtrack, I can still hear those metallic clanks from here. To say nothing of Melodies of Life, the main vocal theme of this game would be criminal. I guess Mr. Uematsu got into the habit of making these tracks thanks to Eyes on Me from the last game, but I ain't complaining. What a wonderful piece that follows one of the most heartwarming endings of Final Fantasy. Damn it, there's too much to recommend. Just pop in the playlist and listen to it for yourself. It's so damn good. Game. I promise you. For the longest time, I always felt so conflicted in recommending Final Fantasy IX because of how much battles and the high encounter rates slowed the game down to a crawl. And I can't stress enough, the original PS1 release of this game nowadays is just unbearably slow. I believe too much effort was placed in making things feel cinematic for the sake of spectacle at the cost of increased load times and sacrificing a good pace. It was the main reason why I was so hesitant to replay it as often as some of my other favorite Final Fantasies, because, you know, after a while, that does start to wear me down.
Final Fantasy
but
VII
nowadays,
is the same
we
way.
don't have that issue. Even if you don't use the Moguri mod on PC, the re-releases make the most insufferable elements of Final Fantasy IX almost a non-issue. Yeah, the combat isn't as intricate as, say, the job system in Final Fantasy V, the materia system in Final Fantasy VII, or the junction system in Final Fantasy VIII, but like I said, 9 keeps it straightforward and no nonsense, with a return to a classic foundation that's not as enriching, but it's incredibly user-friendly and incredibly easy to pick up, if you decide to pick it up for yourself. Well, first off, sorry for spoiling the story for you. But man, I hope you enjoy the locales. I hope you enjoy the world. I hope you enjoy the characters, because so much heart was placed into this game, its setting, and its themes. I personally wouldn't put it above Final Fantasy VII story, or 6 for that matter, mainly because of those issues I mentioned earlier, and I understand that may not be a popular take, but it should be said, even the lowest points of Final Fantasy IX have some pretty damn high peaks. It was because of this game and the next game after this that I started my 20+ year friendship with Matt. SGB Matt, I have to say that because I realized I know a lot of Matts. We kicked it off because of our love of Final Fantasy 9 and 10, and he drives me fucking insane sometimes, that insufferable prick. But he's my oldest friend, one of my best friends, and I have Final Fantasy IX to thank for kickstarting that unhealthy relationship. I understand that's not really an accolade for the game itself, but I just like throwing the occasional bit of trivia here. I love you, Matt. Again, if you don't mind using mods, I can't recommend the Moguri mod enough, and the quality of life updates it comes with. It is now my preferred way of playing the game. It is such a better experience. It lets me enjoy all the things I love about Final Fantasy IX, with the improved graphics, backgrounds, and presentation, while mitigating, if not outright removing, the problems I had with the original release. While you can make the argument that that messes with the integrity of the game's original design, I also believe your time is precious, and if it means ignoring bullshit that does nothing but waste your fucking time, just use the fucking mods, you know? Final Fantasy IX is simply a fantastic experience, and revisiting it for this video has been a tremendous joy. I still don't know why the fuck we named Zidane the Rizzler, but you know what? I think that kid would also enjoy Final Fantasy IX. That would make me happy. Someone tell the Rizzler to play Final Fantasy IX. Thank you. So I think it's safe to say
Get my nephew
this
to play
video
it.
has gone on long enough. And if you're still here after listening to me ramble for a feature-length movie,
I get it.
I appreciate your time and company. It's quite amazing that the top 3 videos now, my longest Versus videos ever created, are all Final Fantasy now. Sonic 06 was the longest one for years, and now
Sonic 06
I finally
has
get
been
into
deep
another
throat.
series that I hold near and dear to my heart, and it's like just back to back with this shit, dude. And I gotta be this video was exhausting to make, and I have to apologize again for just how long it took me to get this one out. I promised so long ago that I was gonna get it done, and it's now towards the end of March and the beginning of April where I'm finally, fulfilling that promise. So I'm not going to immediately follow Final Fantasy X. If you're, in case you're worrying about that, no. I realize we're getting to the point in the Final Fantasy series where these games take longer to record, they take longer to write for, they take longer to make videos for. So, it'd be kind of a misnomer to still call it the Final Fantasy Marathon. It's now essentially John goes back to the Final Fantasy series whenever he feels like it. And considering this video is so long, I don't want to make it a habit to make you guys wait another 2-3 months for the next Versus video. I'm going to be keeping it smaller, much smaller, for the foreseeable future. And I think it's time we start getting back into some more traditional marathons with more short form content. I'm thinking Castlevania, and I think I want to return to Doom because the new Doom game is coming out. And I did say I was going to go back to Doom 2016 and Eternal when I got a date for that. So now's a better time than ever to go back to that series. And I hope you guys look forward to that. But okay, I'm stumbling my words over. You see, what did I say? I'm stumbling over my words. How about some patron shout outs? And warning, this one's going to be pretty long.
Yeah.
All right, so shout outs to more.
Oh. Wow. So just spectacular thing. That's such a long video, I know. But man, I am so happy I was able to make it. I was able to watch it, and like it honestly really does. It really is one of my favorite games of all time. It really is. I love this game so much. I want to play it now. Honestly, I'm about to like just drop everything and play it now. I really like also have to play it with my nephew, but I kind of wanted to get him a little older, you know, because of the themes in the game. I'd want him to kind of wrestle with those questions a little later in life. But anyway, enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Maybe I'll do more if you guys recommend. And please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content. And subscribe if you think I deserve it. And remember, sign up for my Patreon for all my latest reactions to all my latest videos. And I'll see you all in the next episode.